Hello everyone, and welcome to your Bird Box assignment. To get started, you'll need to grab the images, so go to Google and search New York Public Library Digital Collections. Once you're there, you should find the NYPL website. You should be on a page that looks like this. From here, you're going to go down to Browse, and you're going to want to select Collections from the drop-down. There's a number of collections here. You're free to use any of them for your images, but what I've had the best luck with is using this one, the Classic Illustrated Zoologies and Related Works. This is a larger collection of many different publications. You can choose any of them from the drop-down over here on the left. The one I chose to use for this one was this selection right here, the Birds of America. Once you've found a collection that you want to use images from, go ahead and select any image. I went ahead with this little night owl image for my example. When you want to download it to use it in your Photoshop project, what you'll want to do is come down here to the different download options. If you click the original, you'll actually find that this is fairly small. It's only about 700 pixels for the entire image, 400 by 700. So instead, what you're going to want to do is go to high-res TIFF format and download that option. Even though there are larger image sizes available, they're going to upscale the original and you'll get very blurry results. So instead we want to choose the high-res TIFF format. It'll take a moment to download because these files are fairly large, anywhere from 30 to 70 megabytes. Once you've downloaded it, go ahead and open it with Photoshop. And you can find an example of how the image should look. Once you have your image in Photoshop, you'll want to go ahead and crop it so that you can use it in your collage. The way I've chosen to do this is first I layer it from the background, just to put it on its own separate layer. And what I want to do is I want to crop out everything that isn't the bird in this image. And the reason I'm doing this is that the direct selection can get confused by the book being on the page. So I want to take out everything that isn't just the page. From here, I come over to the direct selection tool. And I left click on the owl. And you'll see that it gives me a pretty good selection right off the bat. However, if I zoom in, I can see that there are parts where it didn't quite pick up, or it picked up unwanted items, like this branch. Oftentimes, when using the selection tools in Photoshop, you'll need to refine your selection. So for that, I use the Quick Selection tool. It's located under the same tool heading as the direct selection. You just need to right-click and select it there. The Quick Selection works like a brush. You can left-click and hold to paint in your selection. If you hold down the Alt key, the Alt or Option key if you're on Mac, it will reverse it and you'll remove selection from your work. Using this lets me make quick edits to my selection, so I can grab some of those items that the object selection missed the first time. If you're finding that you're having a hard time grabbing something with the Quick Selection, don't worry, because we're going to refine our selection one more time before we save and export it. Here I make my brush a little larger using the bracket keys on my keyboard to take out this branch. Once you feel you've gotten a good result with the quick selection tool, you can come to the lasso tool to make your final adjustments. Personally, I'm a big fan of the polygonal lasso tool, which makes all the selections in a straight line, but you can choose to use the freeform lasso tool if that works better for you. I focus on making small quick edits so that if I mess up, I don't have to undo very much. If you hold down the Option key, the Alter Option key, you'll take away areas from your selection. If you hold down the Shift key or Start in the selection, you'll add areas to the selection. And I use that to get the last few elements I need to really have a good selection on my owl. Before I go to export it, I come over to Select and Select and Mask to get a look at my selection. There are a couple of overlays you can use. I find the black and white is helpful for finding those stray areas that you need to fill in. So I see that I have a black spot right here on my owl, so I need to add that to my selection. So I'll grab my lasso tool with L and I'll add that. So again, I come up to Select, Select and Mask. I make sure that my selection looks good. And it does. At the bottom here, you have several options you can use. Things like Smooth, which I am a fan of because it will smooth out those polygonal lasso areas, but also effects like Feather that will bring in the radius of the selection, and things like Contrast, which will sharpen the selection if you use things like Feather or Smooth. Generally, I think this looks pretty good, so I'll say OK or Cancel. And then I'll come up to Select Inverse to select everything except my selection, to select the background, and then hit the Delete key. This takes out everything else except the background. Except the subject, the owl. I then crop down. If you crop, it will snap to the nearest non-transparent pixel, nearest solid pixel. There's a faster way to do this, which I'll show you in a moment. Okay. The reason I'm cropping this down and saving it is that it will make things easier when I go to make my collage, and it will keep my files smaller. As you can see, I have a little bit of padding on every edge, so I'm good to go. I'll rename my layer Owl, and then I'll come up. If you want to get rid of this panel, you can just say Hide. Real quickly, I just wanted to show you another example of a way that you could trim your canvas, quite literally using the trim command. It's much faster than cropping, so I'd recommend this is the way you do it. If you have your blank canvas, just come up and say Image Trim, and select Transparent Pixels. And then that will do the same thing as cropping it on all four corners. So you can do that quickly. Once you've cropped out all your images, go ahead and download several of these. I downloaded 8 birds, and then I also downloaded plants from a plant collection that I found in the same zoological collection. So I saved them out as 8 different bird PSD files and 8 different plant PSD files. And you'll see me open those up in a second. Once you've saved and cropped out all your files, you're ready to get started. So go make a new document and make it 5,000 pixels wide by 8,000 pixels high with a resolution of 72 pixels per inch. Once you have your canvas set up, what I like to do is go ahead and layer the background. And then I come up and I'm going to start opening all of my documents. You see here, I have my Bird Bouquet birds set up and my Bird Bouquet trees all set up in separate folders. I'm just going to shift select all of them and just open them all. From here, there's nothing too exciting. To get them into my document, I go into each one and I'm going to hit Control A to select everything, then hit Control C, Command C if you're on Mac, Command A if you're on Mac, Control C, Control V back in my original document to paste them all in. There might be a faster way to do this, but this is what's worked for me in the past, so that's how I brought them in. So I'm just going to speed this up a little bit as I grab them all one at a time and put them in. There's nothing that exciting. I'm just going to paste everything into one document, and I'm going to rename the layers as I paste them in so I know what they're called. Alright, see you back here in a second. Welcome back, and we're back at a more normal speed. I don't know if you caught it, but I also grouped the birds and the plants into their own folders, just so I can have a larger group to control. If I need to hide or lock things, it makes it very easy, so I'd recommend you do the same. What I'm doing now is I'm just trying to find a kind of a good composition and arrangement with the plants. To be honest, I probably have too many. 8's probably too many for this. But it is a good, it's good to have extras in case I need to go back and modify or don't like the look of one of them. For this part, if you have everything in here, I'd encourage doing something that I didn't do at this point, which was I would hide more layers. You can see I've done this at this point. Right now you can see that I'm transforming, I'm doing some free transforms, I'm reflecting, just kind of trying to find the right balance between things. I'm rearranging my layers, trying to find out which plant should go in the back and which one should come to the foreground. Obviously, all of my birds will kind of be in the foreground on top of the plants. Notice I moved my background there, so I went ahead and locked it. I encourage you to do the same with anything you don't want to move, just to make sure that everything stays nice and orderly. So what I'm doing here is, now that I've kind of got somewhat of an arrangement I'm happy with, I've gone ahead and applied a layer effect. So I'm adjusting my levels a little bit. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to differentiate the birds in the foreground from the plants in the back. So a way of doing this is to lower the contrast and make them lighter. It's kind of an atmospheric perspective kind of thing. If I make the plants much lighter, the birds that are darker and higher contrast will pop out more. So you see that I'm adjusting my levels here till I find something that looks good. Because I am adjusting all of them at once, I'm applying a layer that affects everything down because I want to make the change across all the plants at one time. In a little bit we'll get into smart objects and effects that only affect the layer they're on, but right now I do want to affect all of the plants at one time. So I'm making the changes on these layers right here. Once I'm happy with how the plants are looking, I begin focusing on the birds, and I try to give the birds a little more attention. rather than make the change to all of them, since they are very unique colors and very unique sizes and different species. I'm going to kind of work on all of them by themselves. First thing I do is just try to arrange them in a way that where they're spaced out and it looks pleasing. You'll notice although I'm doing a lot of rotating, I'm not resizing anything, and that's to prevent me losing pixels. You know, it's fine to go down in size if your images are too big, but it's not good to go up in size, because with Photoshop and raster programs, you can't make pixels out of thin air. The pixels will get blown up and your image will look fuzzy if you blow things up. So for now, everything has stayed the same size. See here I'm making some changes. Professor Fitzgerald has recommended that we use a muted color palette for this, so what you'll notice is I'm dropping the saturation on most of these prints, just bringing down that contrast a little bit so everything's more of a gray. Later on, I do try to concentrate on making a few of the colors pop, mainly the reds and yellows that are present on the birds, but I only do it for the birds and I only do selected colors, rather than all the reds and yellows in the picture. Something I'm doing for most of these is I'm making them smart objects. To make something a smart object, you right-click on the layer and say Create Smart Object, and then you can go to Edit Adjustments, and any adjustments you make will only affect that layer, rather than the whole image. I'm also using layer masks. When working with layer masks and adjustment layers, just make sure that you select the right object on the layer. You can select the image itself, or you can select the particular mask or layer that you're working with. So make sure that you have the right object selected when you're working with layer masks and adjustment layers. See here that you can paint out layer masks with your brush tool. Just make sure you have the mask selected rather than the image itself, or you're going to paint black and white on top of your image. So here I can paint out the part of the stick that this finch is holding onto. If you change your opacity or brush softness using the brush effects, you'll get a softer gradient. So if you want a harsh transition or a gradual gradient transition, you can do that by changing the brush hardness and the size of your brush. See here, I'm dropping the saturation, and I've actually duplicated the original over top of each other. So by using a layer mask, what I can do is I can go in and I can brush out the areas that I don't want to be saturated. So you see, if you look at this, I can go ahead and paint them in. And if you change the opacity of your brush down to something lower, you can build up those changes. What you'll see is I mask everything out here, and then I go back in and I paint. I'll paint in the areas I want to highlight. So I make the yellow a little brighter and the red a little brighter, while keeping the entire body mostly unsaturated. You can see there I create a smart object by right-clicking and going to Create Smart Object. And then you can create a layer mask by clicking down at the bottom with the rectangle. Underneath the layers, the rectangle that has a hole in it, that's your layer mask shortcut. And I can come back in and I can crop this owl around the leaf to make it look like it's behind it, just by using layer masks and the brush tool. Drop the saturation. And basically this is what I do for all of these, is I kind of give them all individual attention. I desaturate them, work on the size, work on the placement of them, and try to find something that looks good composition-wise. The adjustment layer I'm using most heavily is that hue saturation adjustment layer because I can just drop the saturation down. But feel free to use any of the adjustment layers when you're making your own composition. What I decide at this point is that the foliage is way too bunched up and I need to spread it out across some of that negative space that I have on the canvas. So you'll see that I'm just grabbing some of the plants and moving them around in order to thin things out a little bit and then take up some more of the space. What I'm doing here is holding down the Alt key, Option key if you're on a Mac, and hitting the little eye beside each layer, and that shows me what layer I'm on. So if I have a composition like this with lots of stuff and it's hard to tell what's what, I can hit Alt, select the eye, and then it will only show the object I have selected. So it's easy to tell what's what. Since I've spread out the foliage, I'm also moving the birds around and trying to make a better composition in here. You'll notice that if I've created 2 layers, when I do that trick where I selectively crop out some parts of the bird to have some saturated areas, make sure that you move both of those together. You're going to leave something behind. One thing I thought was missing from my composition when I worked on it was I wanted to have a textured background. So I grabbed this paper texture off of Wiki Commons and added this to here. You could probably also find one on the New York Public Library image domain, but any kind of texture you can find here will help sell it a little bit. I'd continue to push this one a little further. This one's, I think, a little rushed just to show you what the idea, but continue finding the position of the birds, kind of blend them into the background a little bit more, so be selective with your plants. Doing a little bit of adjustment of the background layer. I'm trying to adjust the hue to be a little more red, so I get a little more contrast between the red and the green. Red and green are complementary colors, so if I push it a little more towards red, I'm hoping I'll get more of a pop against the green of the foliage. But again, I don't want it to be too saturated. The whole color palette is supposed to be muted, so just a little bit to sell the effect. Now that I'm about at the end of it, I need to also make sure that the birds are popping and they're separate from the foliage that I've put in here. When you go to export it, make sure to put it as a JPEG, and make sure to downscale the width, downscale the height from 8,000 to 2,000 pixels. And then you should be good to submit it. Continue to play around with it a little bit, make sure you refine it, make it look better, find different images, find different ways to combine them, mess around with the layer effects, do some experimenting to make it look really good. Can't wait to see what everyone submits. Be sure to email me or message me on the Moodle page if you have any questions. Thank you all.